Welcome back to the Combo Catch. What are you laughing at?
The thing is intense. It's just very intense.
Now your microphone is acting up again. Let me see.
Really?
Now We did test it, and now it's not. How do I sound, by the way? Can you hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. How do I sound? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Let me hear you now.
Can you not hear me?
It's crackling again, but talk from a back away. Talk a little bit distance away. How's it sound?
Can you hear me?
It's crackling again.
That's weird. We just tested it.
I know we did.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if we can lower the volume again, because I think your volume's just too high. So.
Okay. What about now?
No, it's still working. It's still like freaking.
Really?
Yeah, and there's no way to lower the audio through the StreamYard. So it's definitely on the microphone end. It's so weird.
That's weird because we just tested it. So I don't know. Let me check the settings again. So I'll have to take it off.
Jesus. This stinks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We have a great show for you today. Fam's favorite person to talk about. We're going to come right out of the gate talking with is AOCIA. We'll get to that stuff, a lot of fun stuff. Also later on in the show, not too long from now, Anya Parampil will be joining us to talk about foreign policy and some new news that she has. I'm going to send her over right now the StreamYard link. Give me a second, guys. If you could do us a favor and like and share, we got a decent amount of people who jumped into YouTube quickly. We always love that, over 100.
Do I still sound weird?
No.
No?
No. But I can hear echo in the background. You must be using the... What are you using for your hearing? So you don't have earbuds for your hearing. And do you
I can get earbuds.
Do you have your microphone on for the... Did you turn it on through the StreamYard?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Tap on it. All right, that's definitely working. Yes. It's not messing around now, but you're very low.
I don't know what to tell you.
A little bit. Oh, perfect. Let me hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly. No shatter, no nothing. It sees the microphone settings. We got it. Fiorella learns microphone.
I'm going to slap you. This microphone is an expensive microphone. It should be way better than what it's being.
No, it really sounds so fucking clean. Like right now, Ricky Rance is hanging out. I bet you, Ricky, tell Fee how fire that microphone sounds. Only 4 people watching over on the Rumbles, guys. Come on, let's get that out there. Now is the time to share. I am sharing the Rumbles on my Tweetsters. You should tweets it out.
Jesus Christ. Fam, can you not be boomer?
125 hanging out on YouTube. 20. Come on, 20 on Rockfin. Guys, go over to Rockfin. It is our free speech platform. There is no advertisement on Rockfin. And for that alone, since there's no advertisement, you should jump on there. Fam, let's get the ball rolling because we have some good stuff. I have done something nice, not only for you, but for the crowd. I have decided not to look at the AOC stuff until live. So you get a live reaction from Pasta Jardula today on this AOCIA stuff. Which, by the way, I have 2 friends, fam, that always talk about, like, that CIA or that CIA. I tried to make a joke with Steve yesterday about, like, oh, Fiorella is going off on the AOCIA stuff again. And he's like, because she is. He got so excited. He was like, she is CIA. She's got so much shady shit.
She really does.
So, fam, go right into it. I got it up on the screens for you. Guys, you know the drill. Hit the like button, hit the share button, do all those beautiful things to help the Combo Couch crush the mainstream media. Fam, what do you got? Go ahead.
So first of all, we're going to have a special guest later on, surprise guest live from Moscow. But
oh, snap.
Oh, snap. Oh, snap. Okay, so guys, we talked about this the other day, right? And we saw her critics call her out for pushing nuclear war, for voting to fund billions and billions of dollars to Ukrainian Nazis, which is essentially what she did. And she got called out. Now, this group, of course, is young people, came with the Larouche group. Now, the Larouche group is, for some people don't like them very much or whatever. That's irrelevant to me to a certain degree because of what they said. Because to me, as much as like I may not agree with a lot of what they say, I don't care, because at the end of the day, what they did was necessary. And I think it's important. And a lot of people got a lot of pushback when they focused so much on who these people were, rather than what they said. And what they said was nothing matters if we get blown up and we are taken into nuclear war. But what happened with AOC was, instead of saying, you know what, maybe I should listen to you guys, maybe I should hear you out, she went back and started vilifying them in a way that is so reminiscent of the Democratic Party and what they do. So I said the US left are useful idiots to NATO imperialists who know zero about foreign policy. But AOCIA is a State Department influencer, because, guys, that's all she is. She's not a congresswoman, really. I said, notice how she uses their language, vilifying the messenger with Trump comparisons, but Putin as well, and Ukraine self-determination. This isn't a coincidence. So let's see what she said. She got asked on Instagram, could you speak on being confronted by anti-war protesters? She said, sure. They were actually not anti-war protesters. Pasa, can you take us off the thing so I can read it? They were right-wing Trumpers, and some were Larouche cult members, not progressives as they claimed. Their own social media history shows this. It was a stunt that they do from time to time. Last time they showed up to a town hall yelling about eating babies or something. It's a thing they do to go viral and draw in people. This time they were parroting pro-Putin talking points. Not anti-war to support Russia's imperialist project to invade and seize neighboring countries either. Ukraine, like other nations, has the right to self-determination. The only person instigating threats of nuclear weapons is Putin, no one else. As far as their comments about Tulsi Gabbard, Gabbard has voted for more defense budget increases than I ever have. Look it up. Happy to dig more into Ukraine in other posts. A lot of these right-wing video and social media stunts are predicated on people not knowing the context and just believing whatever the person is saying for face value, which is exactly what she's doing here, by the way. For example, in the video, they cut out the part where they waited to yell until a deaf constituent was trying to ask a question, so it would look like everyone was mad at their words instead of the fact that they were harming a person with a disability. Again, bringing up the disability. So again, I was just pointing out her projection and how she uses Russia's imperialist project and uses a lot of calling them right-wingers. And this is exactly what she's doing. She's projecting, because she's giving you a whole scenario, a whole narrative about Ukraine being the victim and about Ukraine's independent right, without giving you the context as to what happened before that. And so this is precisely what I'm talking about here. And of course, we know that Ukraine, his government was overthrown in 2014 via a coup. And we know that, of course, there was a violation of the Minsk Accords. NATO kept expanding eastward, breaking Russia's red lines. But she doesn't mention any of that. She doesn't even reference the funding of Nazis or nuclear war that she was being criticized for. So she's not addressing all of this, right? Because she doesn't need to address this, because her job is to distract and influence via social media, especially the youth, because the youth is exactly how the West has always turned people against their own countries or distracted them from actually organizing. And her job is, of course, simple PR for the State Department. And if you look into her background, it's not surprising. If you look into who she hung out with and how they propped up the fact that she was a bartender, but really she had been working for the government for a long time.
Yep. And fam, you saw her bartending skills. You were not that impressed, you said.
I wasn't. I'm ready to go toe to toe with AOC's bartending. I think her bartending sucks, and I think I could be a way better bartender than her, because I was a real bartender for like 10 years.
We've issued the challenges. Number one, Fee wants to take AOC on in a bartending competition. Number two, I want to take on Cenk Uygur in an MMA fight. It's out there. You got it, guys. If you want to do it, we have it. We'll do it for charity. We'll let you pick the charity, just so we can beat the you know what out of you.
Not Ukrainian neo-Nazis, please. Yeah, we're not doing that charity.
Okay, so fam, let's talk about people who are running cover over here, because I think that's more of the story too as well. I can't wait to have Anya come on, because I want to ask Anya about the whole fence sitting and when people take this kind of stance. And don't get me wrong, there are arguments to be made for people who are saying, okay, let's look at this from both sides. However, at the end of the day, my point stands and my position stands with exactly what Vanessa Beeley said on this show. Look who the ultimate aggressor is, and look who the ultimate of being oppressed is. That's where you start your point of view from. Yeah, you could technically say that everybody's point of view is propaganda, and you're spewing this person's propaganda over that person's propaganda, but it's kind of like a chicken shit argument. It's very myopic, if you ask me.
It's reductionist. That's
Just
what
it
it is.
is totally reductionist, fam. What do we got over here?
So Katie got in some hot water, and she did rectify her statement. She said that she was wrong when she said that AOC's protesters did a bad job and that Larouche is very bad and Tulsi is good on some things and terrible on others, and protests can be justifiable and ineffective. So she was in some hot water because she focused on the messenger rather than the message, right? And
Yeah.
like this is the thing. Like you don't have to be a fan of Larouche, but I'm just pointing out the different I guess reactions that people had regarding this whole thing, and it really doesn't matter about who these people were. They pointed out something right in her and what she what she did. Now LaRouche, I don't agree with him on climate change. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but they actually had the guts to have people out there. So I think that that was something that was important, right? So at least she had the whatever, she actually rectified and responded to that. She had stated something, criticized the protesting, which kind of made it seem like it was a very elitist thing to do.
Your
So a
mic
lot of people were responding to that.
your microphone went a little bit rogue. It seems like they were very close on the edge of being staticky and sometimes not staticky. So the last sentence, we'll just repeat that. Hello, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah. So I was just saying,
Staticky. Shit.
is it bad?
You need to put earbuds in too because there's an echo.
Okay. I can get the earbuds if you wait a minute.
Go get the earbuds and I will just address the crowd out there. Sorry, guys. Oh. Guys, thank you so much for joining the Convo Couch. We should have our guest here very shortly. Anya Parampil is going to come in and talk a little bit about foreign policy, a new project she's working on. Fiorella is going to get some earbuds. She'll be right back. I hear static, but no echo. Okay. Thank you, Bob K. We're working on it.
Okay.
So put your earbuds in, but then when you go to your settings and your audio, keep your microphone on, but put your sound to your earbuds, and that should work. You don't have to make a complete change to them.
Let's see. Let's hope it is. But when I have my guest on, we're just going to have to take everything off, I guess.
Yeah, your microphone setting's a little bit too loud again.
Okay. Still? I didn't change anything.
There's no static there. See, that's beautiful.
Okay.
Did you put your earbuds in?
Yeah, they're in.
All right, go to your settings and put your microphone back on because I think your microphone's turned off. All right, guys.
No, the microphone is on.
Gotcha. Perfect. So that's no static right now, and the earbuds are working good. Oh, there comes a little static. We'll see. Oh, Jesus.
I hear it.
Damn. Touched. My microphone's coming in and out, too.
I don't know if it's... Huh?
Who was that back there? Tell him to keep down.
He'll be on in a second.
Okay, fam. So let's get to the Tulsi part because, first of all, let's talk about Katie's kind of initial reaction. And this is something that's going on because I'm not going to single out Katie Halper on this. This is like a reaction that you feel you have to say certain things to justify others. In other words, because a person has a bad point of view or they're wrong on something, that you have to put this caveat in there and say, oh, yeah, because this person is bad on this thing, that does not justify what they're saying over here. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a natural reaction that I think that is implanted by the controllers out there who want you to always make sure that you can't just talk about a subject on its matter by itself. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They always want to kind of bring in the static of sorts that if this person has a bad opinion about something in column A, that they have no relevance when they say something in column B. And this seems like a controlled mechanism, an implanted mechanism that's implemented in our discourse to take us away from actually looking at the problems that are really on the table. Whether we like Larouche or not, whether we like Tulsi Gabbard or not, the fact is that there are some serious, serious concerns of the saber rattling that's going on that could lead us to a nuclear war. You know, Vanessa Feely's talked about it. People in this region have talked about it. I'm sure Wyatt will come on and talk about it. It's a very serious thing. So we should be able to talk about nuclear proliferation, nuclear weapons, and what we're exactly doing in these countries on their border that could lead to an all-out nuclear war without saying, yeah, but Larouche is bad about this, and Tulsi's bad about that, and Marianne Williamson does the same fucking thing, right? They all do this. Okay, as progressives, these are the people who are doing it most. Oh yeah, I don't want to die on that hill when talking about what's his name, Kyle Rittenhouse, saying that you don't want to say something because you might be looked upon in a certain manner if you talk logically about something, because you're not allowed to say that because of the designed cultural rules that have now been implanted, especially when it comes to political discourse. Am I making sense, or am I just talking out my ass?
I think you're making sense. I think I get what you're saying.
They have controlled mechanism of speech within the progressive movement.
It's the ideologue first situation.
Yes.
Right? Like, because I'm on the left and because I believe this thing, then I'm going to look at the messenger first rather than the message. And it's something that we have to become self-aware of. Can you guys hear? Am I good?
You're clean.
Like,
You're
okay.
limpio.
All right. Because when
limpio is Spanish
he
for
comes
clean,
in,
by the way, fam.
Yes, I had no idea. Thank you, Gringo, for letting me know. No idea what limpio meant. But when you come from that angle, you miss out a lot of the stuff. Like I like I said before, and I said it in a chat, like I'm not, on board with Larouche, but I've also talked to a lot of them, and some of them are cool. And some of them, I disagree with. It's that simple. But on the Tulsi Gabbard situation, real quick, before we bring on our guest, I feel quite a division here with her. Some of our friends are upset with her. Some people obviously love her. She can do no wrong. I think I'm leaning more towards, like, I don't buy what she's selling. But I also think that she is where we're at right now in the political landscape in the United States. She's definitely etchings above so many people in terms of not wanting to start a nuclear war. And that is the bare minimum right now. And that's where people are looking at. So this is why, even though the bar is so low, like, she is one of the only people speaking out against this, even if she is still using some of the talking points, even if she is supporting people that are problematic.
Yes. Yeah.
Not just that we disagree with, but that I just think are not good candidates.
Some of the generals? Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a lot of things I like about Carrie Lake. You know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of things I do really like about Carrie Lake. And that's the fact that she's going to work to fix elections. But go ahead.
Right. So first off, she said in this video, nuclear holocaust can be prevented if Biden U.S. followed example of JFK, who quietly negotiated with Soviets Khrushchev during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But Biden and warmongers are too cowardly to do the right thing. Hear more. So let's go ahead and watch this video and hear what she says in this video.
The most important.
I got to mute us up, guys. Sorry. Give us a second. Guys, Anya Parampil has just arrived in the building, and we'll get into this. This is Tulsi talking about nuclear war and whatnot, and the whole situation. Combo Couch, you guys know what to do. Hit the like button. We're also on Rumble, so if you want to get over there and Rumble and help us out, hit the like button, hit the share button. I'm going to mute us up for a second.
The most important responsibility that any president has in this country is to keep the American people safe. But as you and I are sitting here today, the reality is that our president and Democratic Party warmongers have pushed us to the precipice of nuclear war. This is the most urgent existential threat facing the American people and the world today.
We're helping Ukraine the same way we helped Afghanistan. We are leveling this country by our armaments, our HIMARS, their missiles. If you fly the flag for Ukraine, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that the way to protect Ukraine is NATO weaponry in an escalation to nuclear war. That's no protection at all.
The leverage that the United States has, obviously because of the money and arms and everything that are pouring into Ukraine, is probably the most powerful in the world to push for peace.
Our government says we love Ukraine, but they're loving them to death.
Literally.
You know, putting Ukraine in between NATO and Russia. It's going to be Ukraine that's going to receive the first nuclear attack if there is one.
And our guest Anya Parampil from the Gray Zone is here. She's working on a new project. You've seen her on our show before. Last when we did an awesome panel. Anya, thank you for returning to the show.
My pleasure. How are you guys doing?
Doing awesome.
Good.
Ben, you want to start off with the first question to Anya?
Well, I mean, since we just saw, and welcome Anya, great to see you. Since we just saw this response, right, to Tulsi Gabbard, there's been a lot of people criticizing her for leaving the Democratic Party. There's been a lot of people saying, well, at least she's doing something and getting out of the Democratic Party. What do you think of her recent actions? And do you think she's genuine about leaving, or do you think she's just following along the Republican Party? And how does this also mesh with right now the biggest question on a lot of people's minds is nuclear war and how we get out of this situation?
Well, I just think Tulsi Gabbard, from the time that she was running as a candidate for the Democratic Party nominee for the ticket to run as president as the Democratic nominee, she showed her worth and her genuine belief and the fact that her number one issue is getting the United States out of endless war and exposing the Democratic Party for being a sham. I mean, she single-handedly took out Kamala Harris. She also very effectively criticized Pete Buttigieg and other Democratic Party sycophants, really, people who don't really represent anything other than the party. And now that she's moved away from it, I think it only shows, and people were mad at her because she endorsed Biden, right? I kind of saw it as her telling everyone who claimed that she wasn't a real member of the party, proving them wrong and showing that she was actually a team player, and they were wrong for excluding her and for attacking her in the way they did. But now that she's actually left and made the break, I think we're going to have to wait and see how she comes into her own. She says at this point she's not sure, she's not thinking about a future political run, but as long as she's talking about these issues and going on Fox, reaching massive audiences with her warnings about not getting into nuclear war, then I support her. I mean, how could anybody detract from just that message alone? And if that's the role she's going to play, then I'm not really concerned about what her motivations are or whether or not she's genuine people. I don't know her personally, so I can't make that judgment. All I can see is that the role that she's playing in the public view when it comes to this issue, which I also think is the number one issue of our time. We're in the greatest military conflict. We are essentially in a war with Russia at this point. And so all that matters to me is getting the message out there, getting the public to oppose further escalation in the war. And Tulsi is doing that. So I'm going to give her credit for continuing to stick to this issue. Now, had she adopted some other opinions that I don't necessarily agree with? Yeah, but that's her right to do. And I unlike the people who support Bernie Sanders or AOC, I don't hold anyone up as like a god. I don't feel like I have to defend all of their positions and say, oh, they are beyond criticism. I just have to go in all the way for this one person. No, all I want to do is say, hey, what role is Tulsi playing in the media or in the political world, the debate right now? And I think she's playing a positive role, especially when you juxtapose her against someone such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah. I mean, before we get into some criticisms about Tulsi, because obviously, I was a big Tulsi supporter and I've kind of moved away from really supporting any type of politician other than people who want to bring apart election reform, where I think it's my duty to kind of elevate their word because that's my area, my specialty area. But aside from that, as we continue to go down this road, I think it's okay to stand back and give a constructive, point of view on areas we might disagree with. And before we get into some of those areas of disagreement, because when we were last on Jimmy Dore, we were talking about how our foreign policy leads to migration. Jimmy had asked, is anybody really talking about this? I said, well, Anya did talk about this on Tucker. And I think Tulsi is very effective when she comes with issues to the tables and talking about them, like the nuclear warhead issue that we have. She was one of the only person I know within Congress, and to go on Tucker and talk about the doomsday clock. How much of this, Anya, do you think is playing politics, that we should have at least some form of kind of like acceptance, understanding that only ways you can move the ball forward in some certain ways is to play politics? Because when Tulsi refused to not, when she did endorse Biden when she left, I remember watching one of your videos because I made a clip of it, and you said, well, you're going to trust Tulsi to somewhat navigate along the way she has to. How much of this is playing politics when she goes and endorses certain candidates that we might not agree with, or talks about certain issues, like when she's talking about open borders now? I look at that as like a political move rather than talk about the cause of migration. How much do you look at it as politics, and what's the leeway on what we should accept when it comes to Tulsi Gabbard?
Well, Tulsi is a politician, and so of course she is going to be considering politics, as I think a lot of journalists and people who aren't politicians do as well. Everybody self-censors or makes decisions on what the way they're going to present certain issues based on how they think it will be received. And so, yeah, Tulsi, I'm sure she's making some of those considerations, but at least on the war issue, I think it's because of her personal experience. It's very difficult to say that she's not genuine. This is something that's very personal to her, something that she does care about. And I think people are really unfair in the way that they attack her online, and not people who maybe like are from your base of followers or the gray zones base of followers, but I see some pretty I'm sure you guys see too, these just really unfair, nasty attacks on her, when really she's been the single most effective politician in talking about war and opposing war. I just don't understand the relentless attacks on her for that. And people, they want to attack her for being anti-trans. I also think she's very brave in speaking out on that issue. And she's speaking for a lot of women, myself included, who have been afraid to say what they really think about, for example, transgender athletes performing in women's sports. So I give Tulsi credit for speaking out on that.
Yep. Anya's going to get herself in trouble on the combo couch. You can just see right
now.
Anya's going to do it. All right, go ahead.
I agree with Anya 100%. I think there should be a discussion allowed on that, rather than, well, my God, we can't say anything. Like, it's women's issues. I thought we were allowed to speak on them.
That's not what the show notes today. Just want to clarify that, ladies and gentlemen. Don't come after me. Go ahead, Fee.
So I just wanted to sort of pivot deeper on the whole immigration issue, because that is the one thing that I think on the right, like, I can talk to somebody and say, yeah, like, we have an immigration problem, but where is this immigration problem coming from? And I think that's what's missing a lot on the dialogue on the right and on the left too, because even people like AOC don't really talk about the foreign policy aspect of why we are in these countries. I mean, you just saw what she said regarding the criticism she received. Oh, this is a Putin talking point. Ukraine deserves its own independence, completely leaving out the context of what happened during the Maidan, completely leaving out the 9 years that have almost 9 years that have passed. And so when we're talking about immigration, when we're talking about war, how do we, where does that connection lie in terms of politics? Because I feel like both the left and the right have a weakness in understanding that our foreign policy determines so much of our domestic policy in terms of immigration and in terms of so many other things.
Yeah, I mean, that's... Pasta brought up my interview on Tucker a few years ago when I went to Honduras on the 10th anniversary of the US-backed, Obama and Hillary Clinton-backed coup in Honduras, which overthrew the democratically elected president, Jose Manuel Zelaya. Of course, people now know his wife was democratically elected as the president very recently now she is president of Honduras, and so they were able to break out of over 10 years of a U.S. backed, essentially a narco dictatorship. The former president that the U.S. backed through multiple elections, Juan Orlando Hernandez, is now in U.S. custody after his brother was convicted of running drugs and weapons to the United States, and U.S. prosecutors have now essentially made the case that under his watch, Honduras was just transformed into a giant drug cartel, or the Honduran government with the Hernandez family sitting at the top. So that led to a migration crisis because there was violence, there was poverty, there was divestment from state infrastructure and state programs, education, all that. That was driving for a long time the migration crisis at the border. A few years ago when that was going on and I was in Honduras, that was when AOC went to the border and did that whole fake crying pose where she was wearing all white and standing at the fence. And while I was in Honduras, that was literally happening. We were seeing it on television screens while we were sitting at the bars in Honduras with all of our friends there who were connected to the Libre Party that's now in power. And they were saying to me, look, you would not be seeing these images on CNN right now if the United States hadn't overthrown our government back in 2009. So when I came back, I got in touch with Tucker because I'd met him a few years before. He'd hosted me. And when I met him, one of the issues that we discussed was immigration. I said, people would criticize you for the line that you take on immigration or the migration crisis, but those same people won't talk about the roots. And so he was like, yeah, I totally agree. And this is something I want to talk about. And so when the time came, he was willing to do it on his show. And I again, give him credit for that. And the right wing, at least Tucker and elements in his audience, were receptive to that message. And I think obviously the left, the constituency on the left is open to understanding the roots of the migration crisis as well. And it's disappointing that members of Congress like AOC won't touch the issue. Sorry, there's a loud helicopter flying over right up here.
We heard it. We like.
Yeah,
for what you say, Anya, they're watching.
Yeah, that was really loud.
That was really loud.
Interrupted my train of thought.
You were talking about the left being
helicopter. I'll say we live in like the direct line of where Air Force One flies, and so sometimes it'll be like Biden flying over and once there was like a military escort too, so it gets loud here sometimes in DC. On the migration and the immigration point, though, I think the left is wary of discussing the issue because there's another element here that often gets left out, which is that, and this is something the right will talk about, is that the people who not only do we destroy the countries, people come here in mass, they migrate. Once they get here, they're not living good lives. They are taken advantage of. They largely work in childcare and construction jobs, working for people who know very well that they're employing someone who doesn't have necessarily legal status in the United States. And so in a lot of cases, they're abused. They're not paid living wages. And what the elite in this country are essentially doing, they're going around destroying these countries and extracting resources, extracting power. And then they're importing a slave labor class for people to raise their children, for people to build their homes. And that's another element of the migration crisis, is that it is about labor. And of course, on the left, there's this knee-jerk reaction that we need to bring in everyone, we need to let everyone in, and we shouldn't turn anyone away. And yes, I understand that that's morally what we want to do, but that's in practice not what ends up happening. People are, and there's a human trafficking crisis that no one talks about. And a lot of the Ukrainians that are coming here are going to find themselves a part of that dark network and not living the American dream. Yeah.
On the end of that show, you said it, and this is where I really got educated. And you said they're creating a poor working class for the ruling class. And that's how that segment ended with with Tucker. I was like, holy cow, I didn't even really realize that. I just thought it was more about like, resource extraction, thrusting our monetary system on there and austerity measures in their countries. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like this crazy vicious wheel. But this is something that people aren't talking about. This is the nuance about how, when they come here, how much of advantage they're taking of. And then all of a sudden you have these people on the conservative side who really, to tell you the truth, it's not, I don't believe it's as much as a racist element when they say, oh, these people are being racist. They want to build a wall. They don't want to let people in here. When you have conversations with these conservatives, a lot of these people, they're like, look, we have limited resources. And those limited resources are now taking away from veterans and stuff.
Well, jobs.
And jobs and whatnot. So, I mean, go right ahead. Piggyback on that, because that's something that's never ever talked about. This vicious cycle, it creates so much separation in our society from this one issue of foreign policy.
Yeah, because jobs are the resources that people are one of the resources that people are fighting for in this country. And it's true, people who come here work jobs that a lot of people who have been here for a while wouldn't accept, but that's because they're being taken advantage of. And so it's the problem that we don't have maybe appropriate or fair labor standards in the United States, that large corporations can essentially use slave labor, or farms can use slave labor. People can take advantage of childcare in their homes. Construction companies take advantage of people and put them in terribly dangerous conditions. Like, to me, that's the problem. If people don't want to work jobs, it's because they're being abused and taken advantage of and not being paid a fair wage. That's what needs to change, right? That's how I see it. So instead we say, oh, these are jobs that Americans don't want. And so, yeah, we should just continue to import a slave class and destroy these countries. No, these countries deserve to be sovereign. They deserve to, the people who are coming here deserve to live in countries where they are taken care of, and where they have a stake in the place where they came from. Of course, I'm not against immigration or migration. People have the right to do it. And I know that it's also a fantasy to say, oh, we should just like let them have their countries, because obviously the United States is going to do that anytime soon. But we need to at least talk about the root of the problem before we can solve it. And to me, that's the issue. The issue isn't, oh, we should allow people to come here because they're taking jobs that other people don't want because they're treated really poorly. Like, no, they shouldn't be treated poorly.
Yeah. Fam, can I say just one thing really quick? And I just want to make a point that because Anya just talked about what happened, what she was witnessing in Honduras. And then we got to go and follow up in that election in 2020, right? Or was it 2021? Excuse me. And we got to hear from people who were saying that right there, then and there, for the U.S. supporting those other previous elections with Juan Orlando Hernandez, turning that country into chaos. They had friends that said, like, no, we're going to America. You want to screw up with our country? We're going there. And I just want to point that out, since we were talking about Honduras, we were able to experience that same sentiment on the ground. Sorry.
And I'll just add quickly, they supported Juan Orlando Hernandez through 2 elections, despite the fact that in Honduras, you're only allowed 1 term constitutionally. So it was just illegal and offensive to the Honduran people on multiple levels.
Mm-hmm.
And Anya, since we're talking about foreign policy, my last question to you is the discussion of what's going on now in Russia, Ukraine. You've been following the Donbass for a while. You have seen what's going on. A lot of what I'm getting here, especially now, obviously, is you're a propagandist. What you're saying, there's not 2 sides, or there's not 2. Both sides are bad. You have Russia's bad. They're an empire. You have the United States is an empire. Saying that what the Donbass people actually wanted liberation and Russia's help is completely false. There's no way that all these people voted to leave to be a part of the Russian Federation in this referendum. What do you say to that as somebody that's been following this for a long time in your career?
I unfortunately, I've never been to the region, so I don't know it as well as Latin America, but based on just reading and what I know, I've worked for RT for a long time. I got to, even afterwards, I interviewed Russian diplomats, including Sergei Lavrov's deputy. I think I have a pretty good understanding of how the way the Russian state approaches the world and geopolitics. And they didn't want this war. I don't believe that Putin wanted to go to war. I think that, if anything, people maybe in the Donbass for the past almost 10 years were wondering, where was this help earlier? And Putin was really pushed to his limit because under Biden, it just became very clear that there was no hope of a negotiated solution. There was no hope of going back to the Minsk Accords or reaching some new updated agreement that was going to be fair or just in any way, that reflected the reality on the ground, which was that for the ethnically Russian-speaking population in Ukraine, there was no future as part of the Ukrainian state. They unless they were going to submit themselves to their own genocide. So Putin, obviously, the Russian military and the Russian state is exerted in this conflict. It's not something that they wanted to rush into, and they did it because they had no other choice. The United States backed them into a corner, and a lot of people will make the point that at a certain point, Russia is choosing between its continued existence as a sovereign state, and under the threat of NATO encroachment right on its border through Ukraine, or they had to fight to defend themselves, and eventually they had to. And I would say, yes, this war began in 2014. This was an escalation earlier this year, or a response after years of conflict and war in Ukraine. Putin finally said, "Look, enough is enough, and I'm gonna defend the people who want to be defended."
Yeah,
Right.
I often talk about the people of the Donbass. They didn't want this war either. They had no choice. I'm going to finish up on this one thing because I think it was a gray zone. One of the most memorable for me is because I was one of those people who, when I was in New York and I had one day, it was my stepfather's funeral, I trucked about 2.5 hours to go see AOC's campaign office 6 weeks before she opened up, right? But 6 weeks before she won the election. And I saw a very organized campaign, a lot of young people, a lot of youth. I was very impressed the way they were separating, people who spoke Hindu, people who spoke Spanish, English-speaking people, making sure they had all their ducks in order. And I was really impressed and go see it, work out. I was hoping that when she went into Congress, she was going to be one of those people who we had thought that was going to take on the establishment, that was going to take on Nancy Pelosi, instead become named Mama Bear. But one of those other moments that really shocked me is when Max was at the Capitol or in Congress and was asking questions, and he eventually got to AOC to ask about her position on Venezuela, and she deferred to caucus leadership, and it just was like, holy cow. It was like an eye opener. It was the first step of let's keep an eye on AOC. And now here we are today, where we're kind of much talking about AOCIA. But the one person on that video that Max talked to that really was talking about foreign policy was Lacey Clay. Lacey Clay doesn't hold a seat anymore in office. He lost to Cori Bush. And in that video, he pretty much opened up and pretty much said, well, yeah, what's going on foreign policy ain't right, and we should expect certain things. Then he immediately realized that he was opening up and talking. He's like, I'm on financial committee. I can't talk about this, and got upset and walked away. I think it's a systemic problem we have within Congress right now. And I don't think a lot of people on the conservative side, even though they're starting to speak up a little bit when it comes to Ukraine, or on the congressional left side, I think we have no friends in Congress. Would you agree when it comes to foreign policy, especially in Latin America, that there are zero friends right now within our government?
On Latin America specifically, yes, because unlike Ukraine, there is a diaspora that is very influential within the Republican Party and Democratic Party, extremists in Florida, Cuban extremists.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly, and now rising Venezuelan influence. And because of them, basically, they hold the parties hostage. They have to, while there is space to criticize the war, support for the war in Ukraine on the right, there is not much space to critique U.S. policy toward Venezuela from that perspective because of the communism angle. Yeah. Buro's a big socialist dictator. So there is a paralysis in Congress on that issue. On AOC, I would say before she even entered Congress, I believe she gave an interview after she'd been elected, but before she was sworn in. I would double check the date, but I'm pretty sure that's how it worked. She gave an interview to 60 Minutes, and they'd asked her about some of the more radical statements she'd made in support of the Palestinian people and in criticizing Israel. And she immediately said, "Oh, I'm not an expert on that issue." And she distanced herself from rhetoric she'd made on the campaign to present herself as this hardened leftist, and immediately threw Palestinian people under the bus. So when she did that, I was like, no, if you're going to throw the Palestinian people under the bus, then you are a phony leftist and you will throw anyone under the bus. And then sure enough, she comes out, defers to party leadership on Venezuela, does some weird Instagram live where she's like making macaroni and cheese and talking about how the conflict in Venezuela is a conflict between authoritarianism and democracy, just showing that she knows nothing, especially unlike right-wingers. She says that she's a socialist, or at least she did.
Right.
And that was what she had to offer when it came to Venezuela. I mean, pretty shocking. And just to tie Venezuela back to the migration issue that we were discussing earlier in this segment, now Venezuelans make up the majority of the people crossing the US-Mexico border. And when Florida governor and Texas governors Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott sent those buses of migrants up to Martha's Vineyard and to Washington, D.C., the majority of the people who were on those trips or in the planes that went to Martha's Vineyard and the buses that came to D.C. were Venezuelan. And this is a direct result of not just U.S. sanction policy, which, yes, everybody made the point that U.S. sanctions are responsible for driving the migration crisis, but there's actually something deeper going on here, because Venezuela itself has actually improved a lot over the past 3 years since the coup, or the attempted failed coup, since the U.S. recognition of Guaido. The economic situation in Venezuela has improved. You can read Bloomberg magazine will say that, for example. So the people that are coming here, a lot of them are people who left Venezuela years ago, were in Peru, Chile, Colombia, other countries over the last few years, and then after COVID, they started coming further north. And so a lot of these people have been out of the country for a long time. And the reason that they're coming to the United States now is because under Biden, the U.S. government granted Venezuelan migrants temporary protected status, which was something that was basically the major goal of the Guaido officials in the United States, Carlos Vecchio and his other functionaries here. Since the initiation of the coup attempt, their number one issue in the U.S. has been advocating for Venezuelan migrants to be given temporary protected status, which is basically a special status that migrants are given if they're coming from a place that the U.S. decides like they are worthy, they're in danger if they go back to their country, they should be protected. And what it allows them to do is get a work permit and work in the United States, even though they're not legal citizens yet. And so the U.S. government claims this is not like a path to citizenship necessarily, but it does allow people to come here and work. Trump refused to give them this status. Biden gave it to them last year. And since then, people have been coming because they say, oh, if I'm Venezuelan and I come to the United States and I make up a story, the worst possible story about how I'm a victim of the dictatorship, and if I go back, Maduro is going to arrest me and kill me, then the United States government is going to give me a work permit. And I can go work in one of these jobs that we were discussing earlier, childcare and construction. And, these are people, obviously, like every other migrant who comes here, who are propagated to believe in the American dream and think that if they come here and work those jobs, they're going to end up living a better life for their family, send money back to their families back home. And it's really tragic because, again, it is a manipulation of Venezuelan migrants. They are told that if they make the trek, the horrible trek, dangerous, laborious trek to the U.S. border and come here, all they have to do is just get to the border, and then boom, if they're Venezuelan, they get special status. And so that's what's driving the influx of Venezuelan migrants at this time. It was a lobbying campaign by the Guaido coup
Regime?
regime
Whatever you call it.
in the United States. And then a decision by the Biden administration to say, okay, yeah, we're going to make our slave class even greater by encouraging Venezuelans to come join it.
Is there any logic behind the point that some people are making that Biden is allowing these people to come because he wants future votes? I mean, they're not allowed to vote, but you know what I'm saying? That is something that is said all the time when I'm like, guys, I don't see a lot of weight behind that. But what are your thoughts other than that, or why he would grant this status other than making the slave class stronger? Is there anything else?
I think a lot of it has to do with labor. I mean, there's a labor shortage as a result of the response to the COVID-19 outbreak. The fact that they put our economy under lockdown and did give money to people for people to stay home. I mean, talk to any restaurant owner or small business owner, they'll say that they will walk in any downtown and you'll see now hiring, because nobody can find labor. And if you look, actually, I was looking at one of the major immigration advocacy groups in DC. They have a list of the countries that are granted TPS. There's like roughly 300,000 people who are currently granted TPS in the United States. Then from countries such as Haiti, Syria, where there are real conflicts and war, Honduras, they estimate that there are tens of thousands from each of those countries. But then when you look at Venezuela, they estimate there are 300,000 Venezuelans, so almost doubling what we currently have in terms of TPS, who would qualify, which to me says that these people know, or at least they're estimating, that they could double the size of the labor market where they can take advantage of people. They could double it by letting in Venezuelans. So that's, I think, the main calculation. As for the politics, I think it's too tricky. In fact, even I think the Republicans make a miscalculation by just constantly throwing their lot in with the most extremist elements of the Cuban and Venezuelan emigre class, because the Cubans, for example, we're seeing that the younger generations, they don't jive with the blockade. They want better relations. I mean, that's part of what pushed Obama to open up, aside from the fact that he wanted to get U.S. tentacles deeper into Cuba. And I think the Venezuelans will be the same. You might get one generation of people who really hate the government back home and are really right-wing, hardened supporters of the Republican Party. But then generationally down the line, that's not necessarily the case. I don't think you can always predict which way these groups are going to go. So I don't really buy into the argument that Biden's making a political calculation here, other than the political calculation is that they need labor in this economy, and they particularly want people who are desperate.
Yeah. I listen, I know you got to go, but I do have to ask you another question, because family, you have another family. You got a question, go ahead. But my other question for Anya, I do have to ask this because I say this all the time. The right wing in Latin America is different than the right wing in America. True or false, and why?
Definitely. I mean, imagine the worst right winger in the United States and then multiply them by about like 100 million.
Thank you, Anya.
In America.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean,
NED supported Death Squad. Thank you.
Yes. In the United States, you do have like working class right wingers, people who are like manipulated, and it's just a complicated cultural issue in the United States. In Latin America, it's pretty much right down the class line. Now, of course, with something in a case such as Venezuela, you will have poor people who, because of the sanctions and the situation over the last few years, might be more hostile towards the left wing in the region. But overwhelmingly, like the force of the right wing in Latin America, they're just the former collaborators with the empire and the international business and capital class. That's it. And then, there's the death squad issue as well.
Thank you.
And the reality is that our foreign policy is our domestic policy. And so many people that, not just, politicians, but YouTubers, people that are journalists that are so focused on domestic issues in the United States, try to apply the same type of politics into Latin America, and it just doesn't work. It just a completely different politics, completely different understanding.
Abortion, gay rights, these issues are just not the same in Latin America, and people here might struggle to accept that, but it's just the reality.
I want to bring some conservatives down to Nicaragua, down to Honduras, to show them that the people are socially conservative over there. They're like you, is what I tell them. Fee probably gets mad at me when I say, oh, they're like a Trump in Spanish, but I'm trying to prove a point over here to say that like they don't buy into these culture issues. If we see a book that's about Marxism, it's all about economics. It's not about this bullshit that's going on. And I'm not going to be upset at some conservative patriot drinking Meisterbrow on his porch using bad pronouns as compared to the right-wing death squad we got down there that are really actually paid by the United States government to fight the Sandinistas or any other group out there that's trying to fight for their national sovereignty. Anya, please tell everybody where they can find you, what's coming up. You got a new book, please plug it and give our love to the Gray Zone crew.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you can find me at Anya Parampil on Twitter. I'm at the Gray Zone right now. You probably noticed, taken a step back for about a year because I recently finished a draft on a book. I wasn't planning on spending so much time on it, but I wrote double what I originally agreed to write with my publisher. And so that it's in the editing process right now in my publisher's hands. It's compiling all of my work on Latin America and particularly Venezuela, using the Venezuela case and my reporting there to understand U.S. hybrid war techniques. So everything from sanctions to the media war to diplomatic war tactics, and then also dirty war through, the covert operations such as the Bay of Piglets disaster. And it should be coming out. It'll come out early next year. It's called Corporate Coup. I do believe it is already available for pre-order on Amazon if you would like to order it ahead of time. But yeah, stay tuned. I'll have more official promotion for that in the future. And I am now looking forward to getting back more into my typical role, writing and producing video content at the Gray Zone and collaborating with you guys as well.
Always awesome. Excuses though, fam. I'm having a baby. I'm writing a book. Come on, Anya.
There was that too. That's kind of why you haven't seen
next. What's next? All right. We're Anya Parampil, ladies and
gentlemen. Look at Fiorella. She's in Moscow working a crazy job and working super intense hours, and she still finds time to do the Convo Couch and everything else too. So, and then you got the morning show.
Well, thank you.
Putin propagandist has to do the work,
Yeah.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
No rest for the propagandists. That's for sure.
Well, here's another quick question. When you worked at RT, did they tell you couldn't say certain things, or you had to elevate state media, or were you allowed to speak your own mind while we have you here, Anya?
I will say that I was allowed to speak my own mind, and I could do whatever I want up until the very end, and that's why it ended. But it wasn't a traditional. It wasn't a conflict that I had with Russians. I will tell you that much. It was more about. It's a long story, but as everybody knows, the U.S.
We'll have you on next week to talk about
the U.S. government really made an effort to shut down RT America, and it eventually succeeded. Yeah. Only because of weak leadership there, but that's a story.
The people who don't know that,
we know.
Maybe if they try it another round, maybe if they try it again, they'll get the right leadership and get the right people in place to do it.
I hope so.
So they won't fuck up like last time. Anya Parampil, ladies and gentlemen, Gray Zone.
Thank you, Anya.
Coming out, awesome book. I can't wait to have that. I need a signed copy for my mom.
Oh, you'll get it for sure.
Hey, Cuba in March. I don't know, Cuba in March. We're going there for that election. You guys want to go? We'll do Cuba in March, Argentina in October. That's on the list for elections.
Well, maybe we'll see you there, or we'll see you in Vegas, or maybe Fiorella, maybe I'll see you in Moscow. I think I'd like that.
Yeah. Oh, yes. You're welcome to come anytime.
Yeah. Anya
But until then, we'll continue to chat through here. So thanks, guys.
No problem.
Bye.
Bye.
Anya Parampil, ladies and gentlemen. She's with us today. There you go. Ah, fam, that was awesome. She's amazing. Just love to work for so long. Damn, I can't wait for that book to come out. We need more talks about the actual, and the question I loved, right wing is the same in the United States that it is
That was a good question. I'm glad you asked that one.
Because if anybody's the answer
No.
should be Anya, right? Like, thank you, Anya. And that's something a lot of people, a lot of the left, a lot of the anti-imperialists who are doing some work down in Brazil right now need to get across their head. Like, that's what I tell people. That is why
I think
got
the
so mad.
people, I
Okay.
think the Westerner YouTubers that are trying to push Bolsonaro need to get that through their head more than the people we know. Hey, guest, can you come on in? Okay.
Oh, Jesus,
we-
Christmas. Who's making noise back there? No, both sides got to get that, fam. Both sides got to get that shit.
Yeah, you can come on
They
now.
really do. Both sides.
Hold
I hate the fact that they're playing team sports and we're playing team truth.
All right.
I'm going to be in a room full of conservatives on October 29th, the day before their elections, setting them straight on Brazil. What do you want? Who's that? Get the hell out.
Some fucking guy
Wait.
just walked in the door.
Some dude. Can you hear him?
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Shit.
Well,
Make sure you have it from a distance. You look clean, buddy. Limpio. Limpio
Yeah.
is Spanish for clean, just in case you don't know, Wyatt.
no, I just figured out. I wouldn't have known, but you just explained it to me. So
I'm
thank
your
you.
friend. By
He
the
explained
way,
it to me too. I didn't know.
Well, amazing.
Wyatt, not Wyatt. Wyatt did both panels for our press conference in Honduras, the one in Spanish and the one in English. He was able to do so. Fam, she took one for the team and was able to translate for the gringos like me who don't speak Spanish, even though we have no excuse not to. But I'm going to get better at it.
Yeah, with all the women you dated. Yeah, we know.
Well, I wasn't going to go there, but yes, by the way, BT dub. Fam, where do you want to go with this?
The what?
Where do you want to go with this? Are we done with the AOC and the
Yeah,
first-
yeah. We can.
Well,
Let's go right
okay.
into-
Let me use the AOC thing to segue, if that's okay.
Quite
Is
all
that
right.
cool?
Segue
Okay.
away.
Because honestly, probably to me, like the most repulsive part of the whole AOC, whatever you want to call it, that just nonsense, non-answer, non-anything, nothing sandwich, nothing burger, was how she basically tried to sweep all this. First of all, she never answered any of the questions. She said, "Oh, I'm going to address Ukraine in a later post."
Yeah.
Maybe 10 years. Who knows how long that's going to take for that later post. But the really repulsive thing was how she tried to bury all this in the language of self-determination. Self-determination for Ukraine. Oh, we're all about self-determination now. We anti-imperialists, we love self-determination for the Ukrainians. What Ukrainians is she talking about, right?
Yeah.
Because I just got back from about a week and a half in Donetsk. I went to Lugansk too. I met the number of people I met who expressed even the slightest sympathy for the Kiev regime. I can count on less hand. It's less than the number of Western journalists that I met there. It's insane. Everyone that I talked to expressed over and over again just outright contempt for Zelensky and all of these Nazi bandits. I mean, I went to Rubizhnoye, which is this small town near Severodonetsk in Lugansk, and I got to see for myself what these people think about the Ukrainian regime. Self-determination for these people, they had it. It was in the referendums. They voted overwhelmingly to join with the Russian Federation once again, to realign back with the Russian Federation, as most of them have been for most of their lives, right? So that self-determination, if they want to talk about self-determination, those people already voted in referendums years ago before these referendums, and they wanted to go to Russia. And they were very disappointed that Russia didn't back them up militarily then, and they are extremely pleased that they are now, because for them, Russian Federation is defending them from their enemies, from people who want to murder them, who want to kill them. I spoke, first of all, I went to the school, a couple schools in this town I call it, I referred to, called Rubizhnoye.
Mhm.
And I spoke to teachers there, and they told me basically about what it's like having to teach since 2014 under the Kiev regime. They have to teach Holocaust revisionism as a matter of curriculum. The history classes have to tell the kids that these Nazi collaborators, Stepan Bandera and his UPA, Ukrainian insurgent army followers, were actually the liberators. They were the good guys.
Hey.
And that is what they have to tell. These people who murdered hundreds of thousands of Jews and Poles are the good guys, and they fought on the side of justice and freedom. And all these teachers, their parents, their grandparents fought with the Red Army. They fought against the Nazis. They know the truth, and they had to tell these children lies or lose their jobs. And so one of these teachers, she was explaining to me that actually the director of the, I believe, number 2 secondary school of Rubizhnoye, she told me about this personally, firsthand. She said she is facing 15 years in prison for continuing to operate the school, and 15 more just for talking to me, because like Fiorella, I am Russia state-affiliated media. So she is facing 30 years if the Kiev regime ever comes back there. What self-determination is AOC talking about?
Yeah.
And so then she said, and this school, we're a little worried. We have distance teaching. We have to have kids coming up. And while I'm interviewing, there's a steady stream of cars coming, parents coming in to pick up their assignments for their children. And, why are they doing this? Well, 3 weeks ago, the number 10 secondary school in Rubizhnoye was bombed with 6 HIMARS missiles paid for by U.S. taxpayers. Absolutely destroyed, devastated, just completely obliterated. We walked across the street about 300 meters away, and they sent another one over there to just blow up this apartment building. And we spoke to a couple people there. Obviously, the first woman we talked about the referendum with her a little bit. She was incredibly grateful that it had happened. She said it wished it had happened a long time ago. And then we spoke to an old woman sitting outside her totally bombed out apartment, and she's sitting there with a makeshift cane. She can't walk. And we said, what happened? Who made these craters? And she said, those cursed fascists, the Ukrainians, obviously, they made this. And we start talking to her. Are you okay? She just immediately broke down in tears. You can find this video on my Telegram and on my Twitter, by the way. She immediately just broke down in tears. And so we had to basically take off our journalistic hats and kind of ended this interview. And then we just went to find her humanitarian aid, because not only did they blow up her entire home, everything she's ever known, they blew up all her documents. So now she has trouble getting access to humanitarian aid. So she had to go in and she was struggling to basically prove who she was. So we went back to the town. We went to the humanitarian aid office and we spoke to them. We explained the situation. The woman behind the desk said, look at this whole list of all these elderly people who have gone through the same exact thing. There's a whole list of them. And so we managed to get some bread, get some different supplies for her, get some different sausage and some kind of food products that wouldn't spoil, because she has no windows. She needs to make sure this, that she's going to be able to, this food is going to keep for a while. And we brought it back to her, and she just explained to us like what her life is right now. And she can't get in contact with her kids. She doesn't have phone service yet. The Russian Federation forces are back, but they haven't been able to restore all these vital services quite yet. And she said that she just, for now, she looks up at the wall and she looks at the pictures of her children, and she says, look down at what, she says she just asked them to look down at what her life has become. And we asked her, like, what do you think about, Americans knowing that basically they paid for this bomb that just destroyed your life? And she said they must have no heart. They must just be beasts, because how else could they do this to me? And I wish that I had something to say in response to that, but I didn't. I just don't. And I hope that someday I will. And I hope that more and more people wake up to the reality of what it is that our government is doing in our name with our money to poor women like 68-year-old Natalia that I talked to. Because if we don't, one day it's going to be us too.
Let's unplug the mic, fam, and plug it back in. They're still having some static towards the last part. Some people were kind of saying that what Wyatt was saying was getting a little bit staticky. I think for the most part, it was heard, Wyatt. I put up a comment on the screen. It was the wrong comment. But I want to ask you a question really quickly about, we have a bunch of people who are disagreeing with us and saying that this is, now there are people out there that I know that aren't familiar with the foreign policy history, especially even going back to 2014, what happened on the Maidan, how the United States got caught red-handedly changing the government. We have Victoria Nuland, her phone call. It's not a smoking gun, it's a smoking bazooka. And she pretty much said who they're going to pick as their next leader, their next interim leader, while her and Jeffrey Pyatt went on the Maidan handing out cookies and encouraging people like Vitaly Klitschko and all these other groups that were very loyal and close with Banderas, Stefan Banderas, Jesuits of sorts. What do you say to those people who say, well, I don't stand with NATO, I don't stand with the US, I don't stand with Russia, I stand with their people? And what Russia is doing is also a re-envision of the old Soviet Union, that Putin is actually trying to obtain space and land, and it's more about that rather than waiting 8-9 years, people, the United States and the West ignoring the Minsk Accords, ethnic Russians crying for help. What are your thoughts to those people who say that Putin is just trying to expand the old Soviet Union and we should be standing with the people and not with what Russia is doing? Your microphone's not on. Hold on. You have to turn it back on to the settings.
We're muted.
There you go.
So first of all, there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that Vladimir Putin wants to recreate the Soviet Union, wants to go and invade Europe. This is all nonsense. It's part of a propaganda campaign being waged by the CIA and by their client media lapdogs in the West. What we know is that, and this isn't me saying it, this is not Russian propaganda. This is CIA Director Bill Burns, who said that Ukraine is the red line for Russia. This is multiple former secretaries of defense of the United States, including William Perry under Clinton, and who went toe-to-toe with Al Gore over this and said he considered resigning over this specific point, over this insistence of NATO expansion. We know from Robert Gates, right? Another U.S. Secretary of Defense, who said the same exact point, that this NATO expansion is reckless and that is going to push us towards war with Russia. This concept of Ukraine being this big, glaring red line for Russia, their massive point of this is a point of security, not just national security in the sense that we use it in the West, but of real territorial integrity. The United States goes out to Iraq, to countries that are not on its border, to Afghanistan, to Syria, to Libya, Somalia, all over the world, countries that don't share a border with the United States. And they overthrow governments. They tried to overthrow the government of Nicaragua, of Cuba, of Venezuela, just in the past, 5 years? I mean, they are trying to overthrow governments all over the place. And we think, oh, well, they must just be trying to do that too. No, we're talking about a country that is on their border, that historically was used to invade Russia by people like Adolf Hitler, by Napoleon. Every recent Russian invasion of Russia has come through Ukraine. It is an extremely sore spot. It is not some projection of Vladimir Putin's imperial ambitions. It is a question of national security. And to follow up on the point of self-determination, if you really believe in you don't believe in governments, fine. You don't have to like the United States government, the Russian government. Then let the people of the Donbass decide for themselves. And what you will find if you come here and you ask them yourselves is that overwhelmingly, almost everybody you talk to wants to be a part of Russia. It is not up for me to decide. It's not up for Fee to decide. It's not up for you to decide, Pasta, and it's not up for the people in the comments to decide. It's for the people who live there to decide. And what they say is that they want to be a part of Russia. So if you believe in self-determination, If you actually believe it, not like AOC pretends to, then you need to respect that point.
There are people who will say, though, that you can't call out United States imperialism unless you call out China's imperialism or Russia's imperialism. They point to positions like China selling drones to United Arab Emirates that you're used against to kill Houthis and whatnot. Do you see any fair comparisons of, China and Russia being an imperialist power somewhat similar to the United States, or do you think it's more of their actions are just a reaction to what NATO is trying to do?
I adhere to a pretty specific definition of imperialism. I adhere basically to the definition that was kind of created when we started talking about imperialism in the modern sense, that was more or less come up with by Lenin, who says that imperialism is not just governments doing things in their own interest. It's not just people doing things that make them money. It is basically it's the highest stage of capitalism. It is the conversion of finance capital and the merger of the banks and the industries into these things like BlackRock, you know what I mean? Things like all these sort of like finance corporations that go around, and it is a multinational thing. It's not just governments doing things that we don't like, going around and giving out loans. It's things like the IMF and the World Bank that come in with, you know what I mean, with massive strings attached that force people to privatize their whole economies. They force them to take their industries, their resources, and sell them off to the West, the highest bidder. That is imperialism to me, not some government selling something to somebody I don't like. I mean, there are fair points to be made about, and criticisms to be made about who, China sells weapons to. Sure, that's not imperialism, though. That's not, they're not going around and like trying to overthrow governments that they dislike. That's the main point here. Russia doesn't go around and try to overthrow governments they don't like, with this one very specific exception, because it presented a massive national security threat, an existential threat, moreover, to the continued safety and security of not just the people of the Donbass, but all the people of Russia.
Yeah.
So, to me, it doesn't really play out. And whenever I hear these things, I just think these people don't really understand what imperialism, they don't really understand what the US government has been doing to all these countries that we've been to. We've seen firsthand what it's like to go to Honduras and see how just devastated a country can get. The absolute like criminality that comes out, the lack of just basic social services and safety that comes when you just sell off a whole country to the highest bidder. People who say this stuff, I just think you just don't really know what you're talking about.
Well, what about those people who talk about the dialogue of an economic hitman, saying that China's going in just a different way? They're not going in with a missile or a tank. They're just going in with their checkbook. But at the end of the day, once that country is totally in debt to them and can't pay it, then China will take it over. And that's their form of imperialism.
Okay, well, I would say show me the evidence that that's happened. Show me anywhere in the world where that's actually happened, and I would entertain this idea. But the reality is, like, China hasn't done that. People in the West try to point to a handful of like specific examples where they say, oh, well, China, came in and renegotiated this or that. But I mean, you can even hear like Yanis Varoufakis, former Greek minister, has made this very, very compelling argument. And I would encourage folks to go up and look up this video where he explains basically that, when he came into office with Syriza, I guess about a decade ago, they went through this process of realizing, okay, hold on, this port deal that we have, it's kind of one-sided, that we have with China, and we think like there's some kind of problems here, and they're using subcontractors in a way we don't like, and that's going to undermine our unions, and we don't like this particular payment arrangements. And he said, so we went to the Chinese and we presented them these different issues that we have. And to my very great surprise, they said, okay, we'll fix them. We'll change them. And then he said, can you imagine going to like a German multinational or US multinational and having them say that? Just saying, okay,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
we'll change it. If you don't like it, that's fine. We'll change it. You
Yeah.
can't, you cannot, because they've never done it and they never will.
Yeah.
Because, that's just, sure. And maybe it's an exercise in soft power. I'm sure it is. But the reality is that nothing they have done in any way can hold a candle to what the US is actively doing right now.
Yeah.
Not in our imaginations of like what China might do in some hypothetical situation in the future.
Right.
What is happening right now is real imperialism, and the consequences are devastating for the people that have to live through it. So
Yeah.
don't live off in fantasy land, live in the real world where real imperialism is happening.
Fam,
And I just have to say, like, just going off of that, because I've been getting attacked for this, pointing out the same exact thing. Like, why are you so focused on what China might do in the future or Russia might do in the future? Why, like, right now we're facing nuclear threat, like a very, very strong nuclear threat, and one empire that has destroyed and overthrown so many countries all over the world is the one waging this war, using Ukraine as a proxy against Russia. And that's the reality here. There are actual Nazis right now. They were chanting the Stefan Bandera song. Like, I mean, they're so proud of who they are. The only people in denial are the people in the West. Trying to equate Russia with NATO and the United States is not only ignorant, it's dangerous. It's dangerous because you're becoming a tool of the enemy. And I see a very clear distinction right now. The same way I don't think Palestinians and Israelis are fighting a fair fight. I think that it's as an apartheid state, that Palestinians have the right to be there, that Israel, they shouldn't be where they are. I mean, I have a very strong opinion on that. And I think there's the good and there's the bad. The same way I feel about this situation, and I would feel it whether I work for RT or whether I wouldn't work for RT tomorrow. This is literally a consistent take. If you're an anti-imperialist, you don't just sit back and say, oh, well, they should just be peaceful and just, sing kumbaya and hope that NATO doesn't kill them. This is an existential fight for Russia. It's an existential fight for a lot of people that have been just pounded by the West. And this is now a pushback towards a sort of chance to have something like a multipolarity, something like that. So I definitely think it's completely ludicrous to try to justify and say, oh, they're both bad. We should just be against war. Obviously, nobody wants this war. We're against war. But what would you do if somebody came after your family, your country, and literally unjustifiably was killing everybody around you? You wouldn't just sit back and say, all right, well, no war, so I'm just going to sit here.
Yeah, war is imperialist. Stopping my family and friends from getting murdered by U.S. manufactured weapons, that's imperialism. No, it's not.
Yeah.
No.
Guys, do me a favor. Unplug again and go in the microphone while I do a quick little speech. Not speech, but little question again, because I want you to answer this question, Wyatt, because of what we've experienced. And let me just point out the fact that not only do they say what's going to happen in the future, with China and Russia, that whole element, they use what's happened in the past as a reason for their theories. Oh, this is just another cycle. If you go back and look at the cycles, I'm like, dude, I don't want to hear what the cycles were before the microchip was invented, before the phone was invented. I want to talk about what's going on right now. Really, I hear you when you're making a case for what happened during the Ming Dynasty, right? You like that one? But I want to fucking talk about brass tacks about what's going on today. And the ultimate aggressor is who I'm looking at. Same point of view Vanessa Beeley had and Eva Bartlett had when they also said, with all this fucking fence sitting, when people want to say war is bad no matter where it comes from, man. That's my Bill Clinton voice. Like, I did not have relationships with that warmonger, but I did. What's going on today is the ultimate aggressor is the United States. They fucking, perpetrated this. They pushed for this. They went into this whole situation in 2014. They removed the government. The elected government was there, put their puppet into play, immediately went to the Donbass, 4 years bombing these people on the border. And like Eva said, these people didn't want war. They wanted a right to live. Wyatt, I've been doing this with Fiorella for 5 years now, right? And I know why my partner went to this region, why she wanted to do this, because technically you can say that any form of if you the definition propaganda, you can say what this people are doing over here is a form of propaganda. You can make everything a form of propaganda. Therefore, that kind of justifies your bullshit fucking theory about, why Fiorella went over there, whether she knew it or not. She's participating in a form of propaganda because she's working for the Russian government, state affiliate government at a specific time. Why did you desire to go over there and see this whatnot? Is it because you're a socialist or a communist? Why did you want to go over into that region and do some reporting?
Because no one else will. No one else is doing it. No one else will. If the Western media, and this is a point I've made several times, if CNN, if MSNBC wanted to send their reporters over here, they could. And I spoke just a couple of days ago with an Al Jazeera Arabic reporter in Donetsk. Al Jazeera Arabic has 3, reporters on the Ukrainian side, and then they have one in Donetsk. It's not exactly parity there, but at least they're showing both sides. They don't do that in Al Jazeera English anymore. They would show the reality of Ukraine just even a few years ago when they wrote about the Mirotvorets official Ukrainian government kill list and wrote like a pretty big expose in 2019. They interviewed the founder, Interior Ministry advisor Anton Gerashenko, and he basically played this off as this is just an information repository. This isn't a kill list. But the mainstream media doesn't send people to cover this. If they did, I wouldn't feel compelled to come here, But the reality is I can count the number of Western journalists, the number of journalists who speak English and are putting out the reality, telling these people's stories on one hand. If somebody else would go do it, then I wouldn't have to do it. Yeah. And I wish that I didn't have to, because what was my immediate reaction as soon as I get into Donetsk? Within 2 hours, my hotel was bombed. I was 30 seconds away from getting hit by an artillery strike by the Ukrainian regime with a 155 millimeter artillery shell, NATO standard, not Soviet, NATO standard, either sent by a British-made M777 howitzer or a French Caesar howitzer, but definitely by NATO. And they sent that directly. That was my welcome to Donetsk present, And I watched this massive explosion directly in front of me, 100 meters away. It was like the most terrifying firework I've ever seen in my life. It just totally tore apart the corner, and it blasted not just shrapnel directly into the windows and revolving door of my hotel. The shockwave, it hit me and it took out the windows above me. So I had glass raining down around me 100 meters away. This is not a joke. This is not a game. This is what they're doing to the journalists who come here. And if the Western press would come here, they would have to cover it. Yeah. Because how could you not? So that's why they don't send anybody here. So I wish they would, because then some people in the West might have an understanding of what all their money is actually going to.
For Sputnik, are you centered on what you can say? Do you have to go? Is there a certain limitations to what you can report? And are you told that you can't be critical of the Russian government? And are you told that you have to be critical of the United States government? Are any of those parameters put on you when you're there?
I've never been told what to say at all. I have never had any boss ever tell me you cannot say this, which I think is probably a pretty stark contrast with what would happen if I was working for CNN, for example. Yeah. And I wanted to cover this story. They would say, absolutely not. You can't do that. And instead, I of course, I work for Sputnik for a reason. It's that they're one of the only outlets that will let me cover the stuff that I care about. I've known about the situation in Ukraine far before most of the liberals in the West ever really knew where it was on a map. Most of them still don't. But, to me, like, that is part of the reason why I came to work for Sputnik. They would let me cover a situation like this. They would let me cover all these U.S.-backed coup attempts in Latin America that U.S. corporate media just won't. They won't, because it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
And so, if they would let me do that, I'm sure, I would totally take a job with CNN. They pay way better, I'm sure. But
There's a reason why they pay better, buddy.
But again, there's a reason why they don't come and cover this. There's a reason why people like me have to, and there's a reason why, for doing so, I get put on a official Ukrainian government hit list. And then they follow up, 2 weeks later, there's an artillery strike on my hotel as soon as I arrive, 30 minutes after I communicate my location on WhatsApp, which is owned by Facebook Meta, which is staffed almost entirely at the high levels of their disinformation departments by ex-CIA and FBI. There's a very direct line there between CIA, WhatsApp, CIA, Ukraine, Kiev regime. So, I'm not saying that I was necessarily targeted specifically, but the alternative there, if they weren't specifically targeting me, was that they were just targeting all of the journalists who stay at the Donbass Palace, because it's known to host journalists. It's not a military location. There were no military targets. It's a civilian location in downtown Donetsk. And they were trying to kill either all the journalists there or intimidate all the journalists there, or they were maybe just trying to kill me. Who knows? I'm not saying one way or the other. But the reality, can you imagine if the Russian government had an official kill list?
Yeah.
Like what would happen in the West? They would lose their minds. They would cover it for weeks. Can you imagine if the Russian government tried to take out a hotel known for hosting journalists? They would cover it for weeks, nonstop, wall-to-wall coverage.
Well, they had the phony hit list, the New York Times, right? They had the phony hit list that said Russians were putting bounties on American soldiers, and they covered a phony one for weeks.
They have to make it up. Yeah. They have to make it up because it does not exist.
Yeah. Fee, while Wyatt's talking about why he went over there, I'm sick and tired of talking for you. When people are, well, why did Fiorella go over to Russia in the first place? Can you tell us in your own words why you took the job and you decided to go over to Russia?
I obviously went for the Putin money. Clearly. Clearly. No, I like going to the places I cover.
Fam, you're staticky again. Make sure the cord's in all the way.
It's in all the way.
Pull it out, put it back in. Shut up, Wyatt. Don't laugh. Unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I like going to the places I cover, right? So like we go to Nicaragua, we cover Nicaragua, we went to Honduras, we went to Colombia, we went to Peru. I like going to the places I cover, and this is a war, right? This is a war, and I was getting told so many lies. I've been getting told so many lies about Russia for so many years now. Like from the time it was Russiagate, and we caught that right from the start. We were right about Russiagate. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to actually really, I can commit to it. I can analyze it from afar, but it's different actually being there. I want to know what the hell is going on. I want to be there. I want to see if what I believe is true. And that's why I came here. Not because I had some sort of like desire to just make big money and go propagandize for Russia, or because I'm like obsessed with Russia. It was like, because RT is one of the only channels, and Pasta knows this, that like Sputnik is going to have somebody like me on, and is going to have a voice like mine on. CNN will never have me on. MSNBC, The Hill won't even have me on. They literally said I was too radical to go on The Hill. So if that is the case, I honestly think it would be stupid of me to not take the opportunity to be where all of this is happening, and to be able to travel to places like the Donbass, like I want to go to be able to go to places like Syria, like I want to go to. Why wouldn't I want to do that? Why would I stay home and just pontificate about something without actually going there? So that's why I went. And I haven't changed my views on this at all whatsoever. Yeah.
I think we've been consistent for quite some time talking about this. Guys, do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the share button. Fam, you're going to have to get into the doc and organize that properly. I think we should section out you and Wyatt's section separate from
Yeah.
Anya's. So let's make sure we get titles in there so I can get our guys working on it. This is some great discussion today. We had over 500 live watching on YouTube's where we're madly suppressed, madly demonetized, almost 2 years now. They've taken us down. The Combo Couch likes to talk about things like foreign policy with our good friends Wyatt Reed. We also like to talk about elections, and that's another reason why we get spanked, because it seems that you're a domestic terrorist if you talk about COVID protocols, elections, or foreign policy. So Russian bots and domestic terrorists we are. Guys, we are also over on Rumble. If you can hit us a like and a share over there. Guys, if somebody's on Rumble, Fred, if you can drop that into the chat. I don't see Lucky today. I do see Jilly Love. Jilly Love, we love you. And any other wrenches that are there, please sound off, show some love. There's been a bunch of you today. You guys have been great. Fam, let's get to this next subject over here. Why don't you take it away, because this is the third section for today.
Yeah, we can just quickly go over this one because we've been on a while.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to just play this video, right? Because Joseph Borrell, he said the rest of the world is a jungle that can invade our garden of Europe. Europe plundered Africa for resources, enslaved and dehumanized its population, assassinated people like Lumumba Sankara. Europe is the jungle. So this person is criticizing. He is actually being asked to step down for his comment. So let's hear his comment, and then we can discuss.
Europe is a garden.
Right?
We have built.
I'm sorry for smoking up
everything works.
the
It's the
apartment.
best combination of political freedom, economic prosperity, and social cohesion that the humankind has been able to build. The three things together. The rest of the world, and you know very well, Federica, is not exactly a garden. The rest of the world, most of the rest of the world, is a jungle. And the jungle could invade the garden. And the gardeners should take care of it. Should take care of the garden, but they will not protect the garden by walls, by building walls. A nice small garden surrounded by high walls in order to prevent the jungle coming in is not going to be a solution, because the jungle has a strong growth capacity and the wall will never be high enough in order to protect the garden. The gardeners have to go to the jungle. The Europeans has to be much more engaged with the rest of the world. Otherwise, the rest of the world will invade us.
Fam, I think that a lot of people, when he says, a lot of people need to start paying attention to what their governments do. You know what I'm saying? And not allow them to just represent them in such a negative
rivaling Joe Biden.
Yeah.
I have to say, this is finally getting some coverage in like the New York Times. They finally posted an article about this today. 3 days after this whole sort of firestorm kicked off, where you started having different government officials, because I uploaded basically the same video, 3 days ago, and immediately started having massive reactions from Ethiopian officials, Eritrean officials, tons of African officials who are saying, wow, this is what they really think about us. And they're just, the mask is off. And then I even today, I commented on this New York Times article, and I actually, I said, weird how it took you 3 days to notice. And I had a response below me from an Emirati royal who said that it's because the Emirates has filed a complaint against him and the people who voted him in. She described it as inappropriate actions by a responsible delegate that represents his honest sentiments that display open hate and disgust. She said it's not acceptable. The jungle folk don't take it kindly or silently anymore. Their silence was regarded as acceptance and subordination, but tables have turned. I think that's actually pretty accurate. That is sort of the broad sentiment. So the UAE summoned the European ambassador and basically demanded that he apologize for this. He didn't. He offered this really pathetic, like, non-apology, where he he said, "I'm sorry that I'm sorry if someone was offended, but it wasn't racist," and basically said like, "You're crazy if you think it was." I mean, to me, it's really like a clarifying moment for most of the rest of the world, because they've known for many years that this is how people like Joseph Borrell think about them, that they think about they're just like uncivilized, just jungle folk, just living in huts or whatever. But, finally to have him say it in such an open, direct way, I think is really, that's not new. What's new is that the jungle folk aren't taking it anymore. The people who have been on the receiving end of this kind of rhetoric finally have the economic and political clout to say, no, we're not going to stand for this nonsense. We're not going to listen while you spew this hatred at us. And, to me, it's impossible to separate this from things like OPEC cutting oil production and refusing to pump more oil to Europe and to the United States to help boost Joe Biden's reelection campaign, the Democrats.
Exactly, right before the midterms, right?
It's impossible to separate that, because they're tired of basically being used as political instruments in just, the political gamesmanship of the West. And, I don't really think they're going to take it anymore. And the fact that the New York Times finally had to publish this, now that millions and millions of people have seen these videos and have been talking about it for days, I mean, it shows you, on one hand, first, they don't want to talk about it, but they will if they feel compelled to, after the point that people are, European ambassadors are getting summoned. Yeah. That's what this Emirati royal basically communicated to me on Twitter. And, I don't think we're going back from this point.
No.
And it's no surprise that the jungle doesn't want to take the side of the garden in this, NATO proxy war on Russia. And especially when they talk about them like this, I don't think they're going to anytime soon.
Saudi Arabia joining BRICS.
Talking about that. By Russia taking the leadership to oppose NATO, I think so many other nations are opening up in Africa, in the global South, and West Asia, obviously Latin America too.
Yeah, I mean they were waving Russian flags in Haiti the other day, for crying out loud.
And China flags.
Something to pay attention to, fam. This is going on right now. I was kind of curious to be like, what does this mean? This is from the Telegram, and if you haven't checked out why it's Telegram, please do. Some of those things he was talking about, there were people in the chat that said they looked at your Telegram, Wyatt, and it was heartbreaking what they saw. But what are we seeing right over here, fam, when it comes to, is it Kherson? Am I saying it right?
Kherson?
Yeah, Kherson. Yeah. The K silent. So if you, I think it was translated at the bottom. I wanted to read the.
Yes.
Okay, so there's this the fake news, right? The Russian armed forces are planning to surrender Kherson. The full evacuation of the region has been announced. This is reported by Telegram channels, and the fact authorities in Kherson recommended civilians, especially women and children, to leave the city. The reason is persistent shelling by the Ukrainian armed forces. Those who decide to move from Kherson will be provided with housing in any region of Russia that they wish. This was announced by Deputy Prime Minister Murat Kusnulin, and they will be giving housing certificates to buy it. The amount will be calculated individually for each of them. So Wyatt, we kind of talked about this before. Can you tell us a little bit about that as you were leaving? Why exactly people were being told to leave?
Well, we're basically staring down at probably what will turn out to be one of the most consequential battles of this entire conflict. This is going to be really, I think it's kind of the last hurrah for the Kiev regime. If they can't manage to take Kherson, then they will have no chance at ever, taking Crimea away from Russia. That's kind of the beachhead that they need to secure if they want to have a military capability in terms of invading Crimea. So this is arguably like the hottest battle it's been for some time. And, obviously Donetsk is an extremely hot battle as well, but this kind of is the focal point of both sides' defenses and offense capabilities in terms of the Ukrainian side. I mean, I went to Kherson during the referendums, and even then it was very hot. Off in the distance, we could see smoke coming from different targets that had been hit. On the other side, I assume tanks, I assume different military vehicles. You couldn't really tell exactly what had been hit. You just saw, smoke exactly coming off in the distance. I could see a couple of Sukhoi fighter jets flying super low off in the distance. It was hot, and I got a chance to speak then with Kirill Stremesov, who's vice governor of this territorial administration, and who was actually just, aside from his capabilities as a leader, who's just like a very nice guy. I found him like pretty charming. And he is this guy who put out this message last night saying basically, it's time to pack up your bags and go. And it's being reported, I use the word extremely loosely, in the West as like, oh, this means Russia is surrendering. No, it does not. This means that they are about to fortify the shit out of this city. They're going to set up multiple defensive lines. They're going to have snipers in every single eagle's nest all throughout that city. They're going to have artillery set up. They're getting civilians out of harm's way, and they are turning this into just a death trap for any Kiev regime forces that get anywhere near it. And, just on a personal note, having met this guy just maybe a week or two after he survived a car bombing, I made a post on Telegram. I said he was so relaxed that he made Ferris Bueller look like Woody Allen. He's like, he was just cool as a cucumber. This guy is just unflappable. And for them to describe this, oh, they're freaking out, they're panicking. No, you have no idea what you're dealing with. If you want to pretend for media, fine. But if you actually want to survive, take this seriously, because that guy's not joking. All the Russian Federation forces that are being accumulated right now, that are massing to defend this city, they're not joking. They're not playing around, and they will defend that to the last man.
Bam. I think we should finish up. Maybe put the next section for.
Yeah, another day. We'll do that. I mean, yeah, we don't. It's. I'll talk about it tomorrow on the morning show, and then you also have hopefully a special interview tomorrow. I was gonna pull up this last tweet, fam, but it's. But look what it's saying.
Oh, it's because I'm blocked. Did he block you too?
I'm gonna check right now if Matt Stoller blocked me. If I've been blocked.
He was just pushing for war. He's like, I just wanted to make fun of the fact that he was pushing for war like a freaking maniac. And all I said was, we have the worst pundits and politicians pushing for war. And as soon as I said that, he blocked me. And I thought it was really weak of him to block me, because I've never said anything negative about him, really.
What a baby. He can call for war with China, but he can't handle like one minor insult.
He's blocking a lot of people.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It's okay, fam. He's just.
No, if I got blocked by Matt Stoller.
I think you did.
It's a badge of honor.
He's right here.
Oh, you didn't?
Yeah, I think he just took down that tweet. What tweet?
Oh, maybe.
The U.S. needs to decouple our supply chain from China.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
And prepare for war, right?
Yeah. Immediately, like right now.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
You go ahead, man.
Oh, here it is. I have it.
Volunteer.
You first.
I have it.
The Hunger Games. I'm volunteering.
Let me see if I got. Is this?
Can people that push war, we should send them to.
That's yours. Hold on. Let me put this back up. 1 second. I got it, guys. I found it. I don't know, fam. He blocked you.
Yes, yes, he blocked me. I don't know.
Pathetic.
He blocked a lot of people, though. It wasn't.
There was such an unmasking when it came to the COVID, right? Like all that shit. We were like, okay, you done showed your colors. I didn't expect the same thing from goddamn Ukraine, but holy shit. Here it is, fam.
Fam, read it.
The Secretary of State of the Democratic administration. This is not a random think tanker. Why are we not on a national mobilization footing. If we get in war, we will have to be. But by then, it may be too late. And Matt Stoller goes and puts, and I want to make sure it's up there so people can see it. The U.S. needs to decouple our supply chains from China and mobilize for war ASAP. I really don't understand the apathy. Holy shit, Matt Stoller. Holy
These guys
shit.
are going to get us all killed.
Yeah.
They're going to get us all killed.
Wow. You got to be fucking kidding me.
We're not at war, but we could be, so we should prepare for it and thus become it at war.
Right.
So we should we're not at war, but the possibility that we might one day means that we now need to push ourselves into
war. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh God.
It's the same logic as the Ukraine shit.
Yeah.
It's the same exact logic. Well, they're we're gonna be at war one way or another. There's just nothing we can do about it. So time to get going now. Like, well, the getting's good. Like,
I'm all right with it if we send him first.
Yeah, you first, Matt.
Nowhere, that dude. Holy cow! Just look at it, ladies and gentlemen. The U.S. needs to decouple our supply chains from China and mobilize for war ASAP.
If there was a war movie, that dude would die within 5 minutes. Like, that guy would be gone by the second scene. He would just be and over. Like, that man has no business fighting, like a drunk dude at a bar, let alone the entire Chinese army, which, by the way, is like not something to joke about. Yeah. They're an incredibly advanced military. And like the fact that the U.S. is already engaged in a proxy war with Russia, now they want to start another one. Like,
they can't even have one. Like, they can't even do one. They think they're going to do two. Like,
they're losing the proxy war in Ukraine. They're losing this proxy war, and now they want to start another one in Taiwan, which they're going to lose way harder because it's a tiny island nation. You can't just like smuggle weapons in from Poland. You can't, you know what I mean? Like, they are going to get us all killed. That's not a joke.
It's two nuclear powers, like, they're poking at.
So Matt Stoller, we have a soundbite for your comment. Ooh, sorry, Matt Stoller. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining on in the Convo Couch. Special guest today, Anya Parampil, Wyatt Reed, Fiorella hanging out there in Moscow, and I am Pasta Jardula. That is it for today. You kids go have fun out there, guys. Remember, tomorrow we might have a special show. We're looking for a guest, maybe talk a little bit of Iran, but if not, we will be back on Friday. And Friday we have a special guest coming on, Shabnan. She's an activist from South Africa. She was on the morning show with some other activist friends talking about COVID protocols and what they were trying to insert into the constitutions of Africa, giving more bureaucrats power when it comes to in the name of health. Anyways, that video was taken down from YouTube from our AM Wake Up. It was given a strike. So that's what's going on over there. We will also have on some Western Australian activists that are going to give us an update of what's going on over there in Perth. Perth is in Western Australia, and almost very similar to what happened in New York with the health regulations in South Africa. Ecuador would try to happen on a national scale, a global scale. That's what they're trying to do in Perth, which in Western Australia. We're going to have some activists come in and talk about that tomorrow. So we'll have that going on. So a busy week still ahead for Pasta Jardula,
Fiorella, and Wyatt.
Hey, we are the Convo Couch and Sputnik.
RT Sputnik Couch. Kremlin
Unbeatable combination.
Abraham Tessafe left a super ray over on Rockfin, says, love and miss you. We love and miss you too. Thank you to all our Patreons, all the people who supported us and jumped on in. Remember, we still have that Give, Send, Go going. GiveSendGo.com, the Convo Couch Brazil. It doesn't look like Wyatt's going to be there for the second round to rub it in our eyes. But we do have Cuba coming up in March. We'll be there for that. We love you all. Fam, give us the tagline.
Fam, Convo out. Bye.
Thank you, man.
weird shit.
Fams. What are you kids going to do? You're gonna
I
get
don't know.
crazy in Moscow? Oh God,
Crazy.
guys, I don't want to go
Strong
out tonight
word.
because I can't control myself when I go out drinking in Vegas here, like with comedians. So like I'm trying to avoid going out because my good friend Brett Ernst has a what do you call it? A residency on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and he's fucking awesome. And then we go out after and we talk politics and it gets heated and we brings in people. It's just an amazing conversation. But
You didn't
last
meet Brett
Thursday,
Ernst like that?
Mm-mm.
Oh.
no, we didn't go with Wyatt when did Wyatt? Did you come to the Laugh After Dark though?
I came to one or two of the shows, but I
Yeah.
don't remember if that was the
Chelsea and Rob show when they had it going on, fam.
Still live. We're still live.
Yeah. No, we're not.
Congratulations. We're still live, and our commenters are telling us.